This is Other Voices. We're listening to varied views from local people who might otherwise not be heard. I'm Melissa Hales Spencer, editor of the Altamont Enterprise, which focuses on Albany County, New York. I'm talking to Christine Primomo, a retired nurse living in Coeymans. She's an activist who is passionate about many initiatives, among them the need for every Albany County resident to be counted in the 2020 census. She notes that currently only 59% of county residents have filled out the brief survey. Primomo stresses that the census can be answered by phone, by mail, or online, and that the responses remain confidential. A member of the nonpartisan, not-for-profit League of Women Voters, Primomo remembers as a grammar student being taught civics. She urges, if you don't like the way something is working, get engaged. I heard about Christine through Mayor James Gaughan, who, as our readers are certainly aware, has been a proponent of filling out the census. And Christine has been working on that in her role as a member of the League of Women Voters. So welcome, Christine.
Thank you, Melissa, for inviting me to join your podcast. This is a very important issue, so
it is.
Thank you.
What brought you to this issue? How did you become interested in it?
Well, 2017, I believe it was, 2018. It was 2018. There was a meeting that I was informed about that was held at the Albany Public Library. Our fabulous libraries have been leads on the census from the beginning, and there was a forum that was held with people involved in the census and with the 2020 Census Partnership Specialist, just kicking off why it's so important that we start working on the census and to ensure that we do meet the census goal in Albany County, as well as throughout the state and the country, of course, of counting every person once and just once and in the right place. So as a member of the League of Women Voters, I attended that conference, little mini conference, and that's kind of what kicked things off. I ended up becoming the default person who's kind of be taking the lead with the League. And we've had our own forum in the past year on the 2020 census, as well as we are now working on outreach. And since the census information and census collection started April 1st, ramping up our efforts now to be sure that everyone in Albany community and Albany County completes the census.
And I know you've got a ways to go because I looked it up last night and it's 59%. So,
well, yes, we did. I did actually do myself. I did the same. Albany County is at 59%, which that has increased a bit, which is, from the past 2 weeks. And we have been connecting with a lot. There's many community groups in the county and religious organizations that are working on outreach. But for my particular interest is I have really kind of been focusing on getting the counts up in the rural areas of Albany County because I live in the town of Coeymans, and we have had undercounts in the past census in 2010. And this year, right now, we are also looking at, as of actually the 13th, there's actually maps on the census website you can look up. Rensselaerville is at 33.8% response rate. Altamont's, almost double that, 69. We have Bern at 46%, Knox 63, Westerlo 56. I believe Guilderland is at 68%, which is even better than the county average. But we need to get all of those, communities aware of how important it is to complete their census now online, over the phone, or mail it in if you haven't mailed in the census form you received as yet, to keep the need for an enumerator who will actually go out and do the, what we all remember as, at least I do, the knocking on the door of the census worker, trying to minimize the door-to-door contact. So if we, all do our part that way, we will have, close to 100%, which would be great. We each need to do our part in encouraging others to respond.
So let's talk a little about the rural areas, since that's your interest and also a lot of our coverage area. I know when I wrote about this earlier, I talked to the Center for Rural Affairs, which is based in Nebraska, but it's a problem in rural areas apparently all across the country. And I was told they tend to have aging populations and they lack services like broadband. And so really being counted in a rural area would help. The calculation that the Rural Affairs Center did, because they're in Nebraska, was for every uncounted resident of Nebraska, more than $2,000 is lost annually. So that's a lot of money. Tell us a little about
it is.
Why is it hard to get people in rural areas to do this, and what can we do to encourage it?
I'm not sure if there's like any one particular issue, but one thing that we do know that, at this point people are sometimes, concerned about privacy issues with the census, especially this year. Confidentiality and information maybe being sent out that they don't want sent out, but people need to realize that the census is actually, the data is protected under the United States Code, actually under Title 13, and individual records from the census are, by law, they're confidential for 72 years. Plus, if any census information is, by a Census Bureau employee is given out, it's a felony. So people would go to jail for 5 years. They get, $250,000 fines. They never share their personal information with anyone. Person like addresses, things that's stripped out of the surveys when they actually do crunch the numbers. So we never ask. Sometimes people think, they're going to want my Social Security number. None of that is. They don't ask for your Social Security number. They don't ask for bank account or credit card information. So there's never any money that's required for donations to any reason to complete the census. So it's very safe.
I was really surprised when I filled out the census myself how little information they ask for. It's your name, your age, your sex, your race, and the relationship of the people in the household that you're in. So, as you were saying, none of that information where you think of identity theft, like Social Security numbers, is even part of it.
That's correct. And there is U.S. code under Title 13 that does require all census employees that, they swear an oath to protect the data. So it's actually a felony for any of them to disclose any confidential census information even after they leave. So they get huge penalties. They can go to jail for 5 years, fines of $250,000. The information isn't shared with any law enforcement agencies. And so you can feel pretty confident that the information that you send in on the census is protected. Where people maybe are thinking that, all these questions are asked, are longer surveys that are sent out called the American Community Survey, and some of us have received them in the past that asks for more specific information, but that is not something that's part of this census count. It's done as a separate piece, and that is more of a voluntary. The census, actually, the 2020 census and every decennial census is required that we respond. So as a citizen, we each need to do our part, or as residents, to respond to the mailings and complete the questionnaires.
And I
online now, by phone, that's an easy way. If people don't have internet, there's a telephone number which you can call. I'm happy to share that if you think that would be helpful to get folks to respond.
Give us the number.
And sure. Of course, you have to give me a second. It's an 800 number you can call, and there's actually the census is 59 languages if folks need any language support that are available. So if they want to call it in, if they don't have broadband internet, or just mail in, that's also, the easiest way you can do it as well, just to mail it back in. The toll-free number is I believe 888, but just give me one. 844-330-2020. And they have folks there from 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. Eastern Time. There's also a Spanish language available at those hours as well. And then all the other languages, if they're needed, you can ask when you call that 844 number initially.
Great. And I noticed you corrected yourself. You first said citizens and you changed to residents. And that's an important distinction, because I know, tell us a little about what went on leading up to the census, where there was a sort of crisis with the idea at first that there would be a question about citizenship. And that, of course, would leave out a lot of residents that wouldn't be bringing in the money that is needed for those kinds of communities.
That's correct. And I apologize for that, because I'm also, wearing my voter registration hat today too. So there were real concerns over the census question, being added to the census questionnaire at the very last minute. So that was actually a question that went in front of the Supreme Court. But they heard arguments, but then they decided to turn it back and said no, that, they cannot ask citizenship questions on the census. So there is no information about that asked. That was a concern, and maybe that was so well publicized and people heard about it or read about it in the news media or saw something on television, and that may be a reason that people in some communities are going to be undercounted, because they're partly afraid. So this time, there is no reason at this time for anyone to be concerned about that, because it was not added.
Well, thank you for dispelling those fears. So can you tell us a little about how the coronavirus and the shutdowns that followed have affected the process? I know some of the deadlines were pushed out, but as far as the enumerators who follow up and go door to door, has that been influenced, or how is this all played out with the census?
It has kind of put everything back. They are, as you can imagine, the census is a massive undertaking. So that is making one of the things that makes it more difficult. I mean, we have to count 330 million people, I think it is, and there's like 140 million households across the country. But they are adjusting the census operations at the Census Bureau just to protect the health and safety of not only their employees, but also the public. So, we don't know where things are going with this COVID, the coronavirus, and how long we're going to be dealing with this. So answering that census online by phone or by mail is going to protect, not only the census workers, but also folks that are going to get a visit from an enumerator. And the dates that have been moved, Census Day did occur on April 1, which is the start date, right, that we all are familiar about. And I believe and it has changed several times in terms of when to respond, or the dates to respond are, I believe it's August 15th now. It's been moved out. Some areas of the country are beginning to open up their offices, but New York State at this point is not one of them. So we are not going to see the census takers in our neighborhoods probably until maybe July or into October. That's the range. So it is affecting the ability for, our workers to go out, census workers, to go out to do the door-to-doors. I
can imagine. Everyone's so wary these days. It must make it hard. Having somebody knock at your door would be not the normal reaction. Yeah. Well, I would just like to hear a little about yourself. You mentioned in passing that you also have a voter registration hat. Would you describe yourself as an activist?
Yes.
Well,
I am.
And how did you become one? Tell us just a little about yourself.
Well, I'm retired nurse now. Retired. I'm married. Live in Coeymans, and have two married sons, four grandchildren. They live in North Carolina. I guess I've always been, I've been active in voting always in politics, and just kind of things ramped up for me when the 2016 election came around. So I started doing more, and I was retired then, so I had more time. But then I joined the League of Women Voters of Albany County because they were an organization, at least for me, not only civics, they're activists, they are nonpartisan, but they don't work on behalf of any candidates or political parties, but they do focus on voter registration, defending voting rights are things that are important to all of us. We monitor, what's going on in our local government, activity-wise, going to town meetings, legislative meetings. We do sponsor candidate debates and issue public forums. Anything that we can do to, get the word out so people can make an informed decision about voting. And that is our focus, is to really encourage an active and an informed participation of all of our folks in government. So we hope that we are meeting those goals through registration of voters throughout the communities. We do civics education in the schools. We distribute nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot, initiatives that come up. I really am proud of the fact that for the last year, we did conduct candidate debates and public forums that engaged high school students in social studies courses at seniors, and that was very exciting because that really engaged the population, younger population, getting them aware of what's important about getting involved in voting and being aware of, your civic duty as a person who lives in the United States and has got the franchise, able to vote.
Yeah, and it's so important with so few young voters registered. What role did these high school students play in these candidate forums?
Well, we actually have a couple of amazing members in our league here in Albany County who do little seminars for the students that want to become involved. They help organize the actual candidate forum, the night of the forum. They help with, we allow people, our forums are run differently. They're not a debate per se. People submit questions ahead of time as they come in the door who want to attend the forum. And so the students help with just kind of crowd control, getting people seated, but they also sit with our league members and look through the questions, kind of sort them and compile them and put them into, if we get 4 or 5 questions on, okay, are we going to have to raise the taxes this year? What do you have to say about that? They'll organize those things. So they are engaged in the actual evening, and it's a really, I find it really exciting because the students are really excited when they come in and they're part of it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I was not that familiar with the League of Women Voters, and I looked up you're 100 years old because it went hand in hand with suffrage and getting the right to vote and educating women so they would be voters. Is it how many are in the county chapter?
I believe we had I think it's almost 200, I believe. We do have a new members now, not our usual meeting. We have a lovely little event usually once a year for all the new members. It's an orientation and a welcome, but this year, of course, we're doing a Zoom. Yeah. And that's going to be on the 23rd. So we are expanding, and it's not just women that are in the league. We have quite a few men in the league that are very active that play important roles here, not just here in Albany County, but also the league is, national. So I think there's almost 100,000 across the country who are members of the league.
So if
we are the local Albany County.
If someone listening were interested in joining, what would they do on May 23rd? I mean, how would they access this video
Well,
conference?
this is for people that have joined
see.
the league. I am not certain if it's open to the public, but it might be. I would have to find that out.
Well, I don't want to put you on the spot. I just mean if somebody's interested, they're listening to this, and
but they can certainly go to the website, or and because we do have so much information that's useful for folks, especially this time with COVID. Again, our voting has been affected, as we all know. We have changes to the primary and how we're going to be voting. And we do have the June primary is going to occur, and it's going to be, I think the 9 days of early voting was last year. It started out. So, but if people get texts, you can get text alerts about changes to voting in the 2020 elections. They can just go to Vote New York and you text 474747. So that service gives up-to-date election information and voting changes once they're announced. And certainly going to the League of Women Voters New York State website will give you and give you a link to how you become a member.
So what are some of the other initiatives that the League or that yourself have been involved with? How long have you... So you said you started with the 2016 election. So in the last 4 years, you seem like an energetic person. What kinds of things have you been involved in with that?
With the League? Events? Yeah. I've done candidate forums and attended those and helped. I'm not a moderator. That's a whole training if someone wants to become a moderator for the forums. I haven't done that as yet. Maybe I will in the future, but I've helped out at those events. Voter registration tabling. We go to, any events in communities where they would want the League to come. We've done those where we have tables that we set up with all the League information. And of course, the Census now has taken, a lot of my time with the Census, with the work that we've done. I'm on the program committee for the League. So if we have trainings, for example, or any kind of programs that are focused on, for example, women's suffrage, which we had quite a few going on, I would just help and volunteer at those in terms of any needs that they had for volunteers to be there to help with the events to make it a success.
Do you get frustrated? I do, with just how few Americans exercise their right to vote? Are these forums well attended generally when you run them?
I would have to say they are disappointing. The attendance is disappointing. We do our best to try to get the word out through any communication we can. Our libraries, as I said, have been just wonderful partners with the League, not only for the census, but for if we need a place to have a candidate forum, for example, or, any other events. They have been always open door. And we are, again, a membership non-for-profit. We don't have money to spend on renting places, so we're kind of shoestring, of course. Mm-hmm. So it is frustrating when we have a wonderful person who does our public relations and sends out notices to all any communication that she has that would maybe get the word out about events. So we try to stagger where we locate our events as well in the county, so that we're not just in, for example, the Albany Public Library, Washington Avenue branch has a really large community room which holds like 150 people. So if we are hoping to get a number like that, we need to have a larger place to hold it. So sometimes the location can be a barrier. I'm almost thinking that, right now we are all on our Zoom and other, video chats and all of that. It may help our outreach if people don't have to leave their house, if we're able to do these kinds of things, over a computer like this. It's possible. We'll see.
But in a larger sense, when I was asking about frustration, I mean, here we have this great privilege in a democracy to be able to vote, and the fact that so few people exercise it, I just wonder what your thoughts are on that. And similarly with the census, it takes 5 minutes. Why is it only half the people have spent 5 minutes when their Congress representation depends on it, and when their funding for all kinds of programs depend on it? Do you have any insight on this? It boggles my mind.
Well, it's also, I think, it's something, I wouldn't be involved in the league if I didn't think that was important. But I guess this could be another whole podcast, right, on this issue.
Right.
I just think one of the things that, for me, I don't know why this continues to stick in my head. I'm older, obviously, and I remember when I was in school, even in grammar school, I remember taking classes in civics education. And that was part of, every year there was something on, the civics and government. And that doesn't happen anymore in our schools. So I think, now that I'm much older, and I know from when my old kids went through school, I mean, that just wasn't there. And I don't know if that's kind of part of it. The other part is, for some reason, a lot of people are just disengaged from our political process in terms of what goes on in government, and maybe what's happened in the government over the last 20 years. People have lost faith, and they just don't feel their vote counts. But we do know that it's very important that every vote counts. And I just wish people would realize that it does. And if you don't like the way something is working or something is done, get engaged, get involved, call your local, elected officials and let them know your thoughts. And that's very empowering, I think, for me personally, and kind of what keeps me going, because it does work. And we do know, even in Troy, I think we had an election where the person won, and I don't remember, it was a local election by 1 vote. So don't ever think your vote doesn't count, because it does count.
Yes, we've covered a number of elections at the Enterprise over the years where 1 vote has made the difference. That's true. Well, our time is nearly up. I just so admire your energy and your commitment. Do you have any closing thoughts for our listeners? Any parting advice?
Well, when it comes to the census, again, we each need to do our part. I mean, it's up to us. It's our money, it's our communities, and if there's anything, I think people need to realize that it affects our community, what we get for dollars and cents, for our health care, for our Head Start programs, for our Social Security, for our elderly populations. And for jobs and economic development. It is just so important. And so I hope everyone does, get those numbers up to as close to 100%, encourage others to respond. And that's really, I think, what will get us closer to that, 1 person, every person counted, the right place, and only once.
I hope you're right. Thank you, Christine.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for having me on. I'm really very happy to have done this, and I hope it makes a difference. Thank you for being so community and civic-minded yourself.